Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! I'm still feeling pretty hyped after that race, even though it was 4 days ago. Gosh, what a championship battle. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric. Welcome to the last official episode of the 2017 season. Welcome to Out of the Groove. And a happy Thanksgiving to all of you in America, at least. Do they celebrate Thanksgiving anywhere else? I don't think so. I'm sure other countries have some sort of version of Thanksgiving, but who knows when it is. Anyway, to those in America, happy Thanksgiving. And happy end of the 2017 NASCAR season. It was a good finish. Congratulations to Martin Truex Jr. and Furniture Row Racing. That's right. Furniture Row Racing won the championship this year. In a battle between 4 veterans of NASCAR, 3 of them who'd already won championships in recent years, it was Martin Truex Jr., the one driver who has not yet won a championship, who got the job done in what was an intense final battle the last 10, 15, 20 laps at Homestead between him and Kyle Busch. Larson was there as well. I thought it was a great race. And so today's episode, I just want to talk a little bit about what happened in that race. How did we get to a point where Martin Truex Jr. won 8 races in 2017 and the championship? How did we get to this point? How did it all go down? Let's talk about it. We all know coming into Homestead, Miami, the 4 finalists were Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, and of course Martin Truex Jr. No Chevrolets made it to Homestead this year, which I find kind of interesting. I only say that because Chevy, specifically Jimmy Johnson, has dominated NASCAR for the last decade, so it's just kind of surprising. This weekend's race at Homestead Miami Speedway was also supposedly the final race for a couple of very big NASCAR names. Of course, Dale Earnhardt Jr., who all the talk has been about for pretty much all season. His retirement tour is officially done. Presumably he's done in the Cup Series. He's definitely done full time, and unlikely he drives again in the Cup Series really in the coming years. Matt Kenseth, who won the week before in Phoenix in what was a dramatic and just emotional, epic final win for him in his career, he is now stepping away from full-time NASCAR racing, and he does not have any plans to come back really in any capacity, it seems, so we may never see Matt Kenseth on the racetrack again. And also Danica Patrick, who announced earlier in the week that she would be stepping away from full-time racing. She said she's still going to run the Daytona 500 next year in a few months, but this supposedly was her last race in full-time NASCAR Cup Series competition. So obviously those were some pretty big, pretty notable storylines. Kenseth and Dale Earnhardt Jr. both were running throwback rookie paint schemes, which were outstanding. The race was pretty remarkable. Honestly, Sunday was a spectacle for many reasons. The championship 4, these famous drivers retiring, it was an emotional Sunday afternoon, I must say. And I must say, the race itself was pretty interesting for the most part. We saw all 4 championship drivers lead laps at certain points. At certain points of the race, I thought Keselowski or Harvick might have the best car. At other points, it seemed Kyle Busch was in the best spot. And then in the end, it was Truex battling Kyle Busch for the win. You really never knew. It was up and down which drivers were running well and when. Early in the race, it was established that tires were very important when, after only a few laps into the race, a caution came out. A lot of the leaders stayed out, but many of the other drivers came in to pit and get tires. Pretty quickly, Brad Keselowski drove through the field and took the lead on that run. So we saw Keselowski, who coming into this weekend I thought was going to be probably the weakest of the final 4. He came out and led laps early and looked pretty good. Later on, we saw Kevin Harvick run pretty well. He actually came up and took the lead, led some laps at some points. It was interesting because coming into the weekend, I thought Truex and Kyle Busch were going to be the 2 tough ones to beat. And early on, they both seemed to have like 5th place cars, whereas Keselowski and Harvick were up there closer to the front making things happen. Of course, as Keselowski fell back into traffic and got out of that clean air, his car really did not seem to come to him. It felt like for Kevin Harvick, he had some damage on the nose of his car after he ran into some debris, which couldn't have helped him much, but it also felt like as the track got cooler and into the nighttime that they were not able to stay up on the handling of that car, so they faded a little bit as well. Meanwhile, Kyle Larson was the one driver not in the final 4 that was leading a lot of laps, and that was kind of to be expected. That's why when Kyle Larson got eliminated, it was shocking because I think a lot of us had him coming to Homestead, and I think if Kyle Larson had made it to Homestead, a lot of us expected, and clearly he kind of proved that Larson was going to be tough to beat at Homestead. But Larson was not a championship contender, so he was just out there leading laps for the fun of it, which was good to see. He also had a top 5 finish in the race. That's good for him because he's been on a super downward spiral the last month or so after he got eliminated, so good to have maybe some positive momentum built up going into the offseason. But anyway, as the race got into its later stages and we saw Keselowski and we saw Harvick kind of fade and we saw Kyle Busch establish himself to be very strong on the long runs, Martin Truex Jr. started to make some adjustments, started to move through the field. It felt like by the end of the race, it was going to be the 2 Toyotas battling for the championship, and ultimately that is how it ended up. The race itself didn't feature too much drama. There was a few cautions here, and there were some good restarts. A lot of drivers, like I said, coming and going on the long and short runs. It was interesting to see how the different lines on the racetrack really affected how different cars handled. You could tell that if you ran up against the wall in the middle of the turns, within just a few inches of the wall, not much room for error. If you ran up there, it seemed like you were going to run faster lap times, but that was a risk that a lot of drivers were not willing to take early in the race. A lot of drivers were running a little bit lower, middle lanes, and it was just interesting to see as the run progressed which lanes really worked best for which drivers. But anyway, as the laps wound down, we saw an interesting difference in strategies between the 4 playoff drivers. During a pretty long green flag run, we saw drivers like Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., and Kevin Harvick all pit, along with most all the other drivers in the field. We saw them pit under green and take 4 tires. Whereas Kyle Busch, the 4th championship contender, who was already leading before the start of green flag pit stops, we saw him stay out for a very long period of time. Ultimately, it seemed like a lot of different drivers in the field were dividing up that final portion of the race in different sections. We saw a lot of drivers, the majority of the field, were breaking it up into 3 sections where they would make 2 pit stops to get fresh tires, because tires at Homestead were super important, and they were basically banking on a caution coming out at some point, and that would give them good track position and good tires. Whereas Kyle Busch, as well as a couple other drivers who were not in the championship 4, they seemed to be taking that final stage and trying to split it in half, which means he was trying to go a really long time on those tires, only pit once, and then be able to coast to the finish and ultimately make it probably well ahead of everybody. But for drivers like Kyle Busch, they were really banking on that final 70, 80, 90 laps of the race. They were really banking on that going green the whole way, and surprise, surprise, I guess really no surprise, there was cautions in there. So when a caution came out with about 40 laps to go for Kurt Busch blowing a tire and spinning, Kyle Busch was in kind of a rough spot. Ultimately, due to the way they were in sequence, he still had to come in and get tires anyways, which really gave up the advantage he had by staying out all that time. So in the end, it would basically put him right back in the middle of the battle with Truex, with Keselowski, with Harvick. It really eliminated any advantage he might have had. And I want to take a step back and analyze this for a second, because I think this is really where the championship wasn't necessarily decided, but this was definitely a pivotal moment in the championship run. Because like I said, with about 70, 80 laps to go before these green flag pit stops started, or really as that first set of green flag pit stops started, Kyle Busch was already leading the race. He seemed to have, like I said, one of the best, if not the best, long-run cars. He had a big lead. Truex really didn't seem to have much for him. Harvick, Keselowski definitely didn't seem to have much for him. He seemed like he was going to coast, and if he just pit in sequence with everybody, chances are he was going to hang on to that lead, or at least when the caution did come out for Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch would have had the lead on that restart and been able to control the restarts through the rest of the race. As is, by staying out and taking an interesting gamble, when that caution did come out, Kyle Busch was, when he pit and everything, he did not have the lead on the next restart and was a little bit more in traffic. He was battling for 2nd and 3rd, and that's, I think, what allowed Truex to jump ahead and run off with it. I just think it was an interesting strategy called by Adam Stevens and Kyle Busch. It seemed like they were both kind of in on the strategy. It was just interesting to me because they were already leading the race. They didn't need to make this gamble. I mean, you look at the pros and cons of making the gamble they did. Best case scenario, you win the race easily. But worst case scenario, you give up the lead you already had. And I feel like that worst case scenario of giving up the lead and falling back in traffic is a lot more of a risk than, the possible gain of just having a bigger lead. I mean, he already had a pretty big lead. He didn't need a bigger lead. So I just don't really see why they made that gamble. I thought that was a questionable decision, and ultimately I think that's what cost them the championship. Because as the laps wound down, the final 30, the final 20, the final 10, the final 5 laps, it was Kyle Busch right on the back bumper of Martin Truex Jr., but not able to pass him. See, if you ask me, if they had not employed that strategy and instead had just done what basically everybody else was doing, I think roles might have been reversed. I think Kyle Busch would have been leading, and I think it would have been Martin Truex Jr. trying to get past him. And you can see how things ended up. I think it was better to be the car trying to play defense. So anyway, that's kind of what I thought was a pivotal moment. I won't say that's when the race was won or lost, because ultimately, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. were neck and neck for 20 plus laps, right in each other's tire tracks, nose to nose, bumper to bumper, whatever you want, every term you want. They were right on top of each other. A slip by either driver was going to be, tear was going to be the end of their championship hope. And kudos to Martin Truex Jr. He impressed the crap out of me on that final run. He was running up there close to, if not at the wall, hitting his marks every lap after lap after lap. Even though it seemed the 18 had a slightly better car, Truex stuck with it, eyes front forward, focused, and got it done. I mean, Martin Truex Jr., he's won 7 races this year. He's been the best car, the best team all season long, and it came down to him having to run 20 perfect laps in a row to win the championship, and he got it done. I mean, that's a ton of pressure right there, and the fact that he managed to rise to the occasion and get it done is impressive. I think Martin Truex Jr., earned the crap out of this championship. So I thought it was an intense final battle. It was nail-biting. Larson was up in there a little bit as well, but you could see Kyle Larson was kind of hanging back. I don't think Larson wanted to really get in the way of the championship battle, which I have a lot of respect for that move on his part. I think that was a smart thing to do. But it was intense, and like I said, kudos to Truex, man. He earned it. I saw a post on Twitter and stuff where they looked at Truex's finishing results, his stats for this year's playoffs. He won 4 of the 10 Chase playoff races. He finished second a couple other times. I think statistically, he might have had the best Chase or the best playoffs ever. And I mean, obviously that's since 2004, I guess, when the Chase was invented. But this season Truex put together, this Chase, this 10-race stretch was better than any of Jimmy Johnson's. It was better than the one in 2011 when Tony Stewart won 5 races. Truex still had better overall numbers. And that's just crazy to me, man. That team was on another level. And I remember coming into the season, I really thought they might struggle just a little bit because they were introducing a new team, with the 77 of Erik Jones. That was a new car. I thought that might spread the team a little thin. They'd have to devote a lot of resources to both cars. I thought that would hurt the 78's performance a little. But boy, I've never been more wrong in my life. Because since Daytona, it seemed, Truex has established themselves as the car, as the team to beat. And I think going into 2018, they're going to be high on everyone's list to repeat. I think it was a very good thing for NASCAR for Truex to ultimately be the one to win the championship as opposed to Kyle Busch or Keselowski. I mean, it would have been fine if any of them had won it. Kyle Busch is a polarizing figure. It would have still been interesting. But Truex, he's just a likable guy. He's a guy who's really in the last couple of years found the success that I think he's earned and he's deserved. I think, since he's won so many races this year, sure, there's people that hate on him because he drives a Toyota. People like to hate on him. But ultimately, Martin Truex Jr., his girlfriend Sherry, a very likable, a very relatable, a very respectable group there that I think a lot of people enjoy rooting for, and I was very happy to see him get what I thought he deserved, which was a championship. And I gotta say, I know people like to criticize the current playoff format because it doesn't necessarily reward the best teams all season long, but now they've had this knockout round playoff format for 4 years in a row, and you look at the champions from Harvick to Kyle Busch to Jimmy Johnson to now Martin Truex Jr. In my opinion, if you ask me, I think probably the most or one of the most deserving drivers has ultimately won the championship every year. We haven't seen it become so wild that a no-name has won the championship. I mean, I guess if you think back to 2014, Ryan Newman finished second in that race at Homestead, second in the championship without winning any races, just quietly being top 10 every week. Had a decent season, but I don't think he was anywhere near Harvick's level that year, and Kevin Harvick only barely won that championship. People will argue that 2015 Kyle Busch shouldn't have won the championship because he was injured and missed the first third or first quarter of the season. But in my opinion, he came back and was amazing in the races he raced in. He still won like 5 races that year in a shortened schedule for him. I thought he earned it. He was the best team in the playoffs. I thought he deserved that championship. 2016 last year was interesting because it felt like Carl Edwards, felt like Joey Logano were really the cars to beat, and Jimmy Johnson was there, but not quite. And ultimately, when they wrecked on that late restart, Johnson ultimately won the championship. That one was iffy, but I thought any of those guys deserved it. I thought they all ran well. Johnson had run well most of the season. Jimmy won that championship. It was his 7th. I thought that was still good. Like I said earlier, though, I think the one reason people can protest this current NASCAR format is even though Truex won 7 races, clearly was the best car all season long, had, like I said, the best playoffs ever in NASCAR, he still only won the championship by a couple of car lengths. And he had to drive like crazy to get there. I think if you factor all that in, sure, you can criticize the playoff format for a multitude of reasons, but ultimately, I think it's 4 for 4 in picking champions. I think it's got it right every time so far. But that's just my opinion. It'll be interesting to see if next year Ryan Newman does win the championship because of something. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it progresses. But I think other than the only change I want NASCAR to make is I want them to stop with the win and you're in rule during the regular season. I don't want a win in March to automatically admit you into the playoffs in September. I think that's absurd. We should get rid of that rule. But I've been over this many times over the summer in past episodes. So you guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about it. So in the end, that's basically all I have to talk about. I mean, there's nothing really to preview yet until next season. But I think it'll be interesting how this offseason goes because there's still a lot of news that has not been released yet that I kind of expected to be released by now, such as Kurt Busch. Is he going to be in the 41 next year? We've been talking all this time about Dale Jr., about Matt Kenseth. Could Kurt Busch have just run his final Cup Series race? We don't really know. They've acted like all year long that Stewart-Haas is going to get a deal together and Kurt's going to stay in the 41, but it hasn't happened yet or it hasn't been talked about yet, so anything can happen there. Obviously, we got the NASCAR Awards Banquet in a few weeks in Las Vegas, so maybe I'll do an episode or a video talking about that, talking about the fun stuff that goes on there. It's always a good time. It'll be the last time we see Dale Jr. and Matt Kenseth in kind of a racing setting like that. it'll be interesting because Dale Jr. is going to be around next year, still owning his Xfinity Series team. He's going to be in the broadcast booth at NBC the second half of the season. So Dale Jr., he'll still be around, much in the same way I feel like Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart are still around. They're retired, but they're still around. Jeff Gordon's in the booth at Fox. Tony Stewart still owns his team, and they're still competitive. He's still at the race most weekends. I think you'll still see Dale Jr. around. So I guess I also want to say congrats to Dale Jr. on an exceptional career, an amazing just run, really. He's put NASCAR on the map in a lot of ways, or has at least continued to carry the mantle for the last 20 years now, with what his father did before him, to what he's now been able to do in the turn of the century, to the successes he's had, the Daytona 500s, the Xfinity Championships, the 26 career wins, I believe. Dale Jr.'s been great. He's driven for his own team. He's driven for Hendrick Motorsports, one of the most storied owners in NASCAR. He's had a great career, and it's remarkable what he's done, and the sport's going to miss him on the racetrack, but like I said, he'll be around in the garage, in the booth. We'll still hear Dale Jr., and I think he will continue to have an impact on NASCAR as it goes into the future. So thanks for all the memories, Dale. We're going to miss you, buddy. I talked last week about Matt Kenseth. I don't need to cry anymore about Matt leaving. But it is different. Like I said, Matt Kenseth doesn't have any TV deals. He's probably not going to be in any race cars. He doesn't own any teams. Matt Kenseth might just kind of disappear the same way Carl Edwards and Greg Biffle kind of have. I mean, have we heard anything from Edwards lately? I mean, he's got to be okay, right? He hasn't just fallen off the face of the earth, huh? I mean, does anybody have any news on the whereabouts of Carl Edwards? Please let me know. But anyway, yeah, we'll see Danica Patrick in the Daytona 500, and she said the Indy 500, which I'm excited to see that. I hope she does great in IndyCar. She acts like those are going to be her last races ever, so after that, she's never going to be in a race car again, which is interesting. I'm rooting for her at Indy. That'll be fun. Anyway, that about does it for Out of the Groove 2017. Wow, this has been almost 40 episodes or something by now. Hours and hours of footage of me talking to you guys, one directional, but I still read the comments, so it is not fully one directional. But man, it's been a wild year. It's been a lot of fun. Looking ahead to next year, I'm still planning to continue Out of the Groove, but I think the format is going to change a little bit next year for 2018, and even in the off season here a little bit. This year I've basically done long episodes every Thursday, and that's worked out. That's been fine. That's kind of how my schedule really allowed it to be. That's kind of how I thought it would work, but I think next year I'm going to change things just a little bit. Whereas now I talk about a lot of things in one really long episode, I think next year I'm going to divide it up throughout the week, and instead of having one really long episode, I'll have 2 or 3 shorter episodes where I talk about more specific topics, like say if somebody announces that they're retiring, I'll have that as a separate episode, and then the recap of this week's race, that'll be a separate episode. So instead of having to click on one long 20-minute video and wait until I get to what you want me to talk about, I'll divide up each segment almost into its own shorter 6 or 7 minute video. So if you're interested only in hearing about me talk about Dale Earnhardt Jr., you can click on that video, and you don't have to necessarily listen to me drag on about Matt Kenseth unless you want to hear me talk about Matt, which I hope you do. But anyway, that's kind of my plan for next year, which means there's not going to necessarily be a set schedule where I'll come out with an episode every Thursday. It might just be as new, interesting news comes out, I'll make a video that day or the next day, and it'll pop up in your feed. So I hope you guys are on board with that idea. We'll see how it works. If I start next season and it's just ridiculous, it doesn't work, I'll go back to what I'm doing now. But that's at least what I want to try for next year. But that's all next year. We got 3 months to hopefully chill and just kind of take it easy, so I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, that's all I have to talk about. Thank you guys so much for watching this show. Whether this is your first episode you've watched or whether you've been watching all season, I greatly appreciate all the support. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to my take, my opinions on NASCAR and all that type of stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed listening to you guys in the comments and whatnot. And talking to you guys on live streams and whatnot, interacting there. That's always been a lot of fun, so I've enjoyed doing this, and I can't wait to get back to it next year. It's going to be a great off season, so thank you all for watching. Happy Thanksgiving and a happy holidays. If I don't do another Out of the Groove episode between now and Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year's, happy President's Day. Is there something in January? What's the holidays in January? I don't know. Happy everything. I'll see you guys again in 2018, maybe sooner. We'll see. Have a great one.